in the city. This is Barbara, and it's just so great to communicate with you in this wonderful way. And today we'll continue my reflections on how to understand politics when we look at it from the point of view of ancient politicians like King David. And I have to tell you that this is the most amazing adventure that has been unfolding over the last few years. And by training, I'm an ABD in political science from MIT. So I know a lot about political theory and political organizations and political ways, etc., etc. However, that education pretty much ignored God. The only time God would appear is when I was studying classical political philosophers, and it was there included in the writings, but that relationship between God and politics was always considered something of the past. And I really pretty much did not think about how to apply it to contemporary politics. And of course, there is this massive political science from Marxism-Leninism that like totally attacks God and destroys any mention of God in the context of politics. However, they did not ignore God. They just wanted to eliminate God, but the question of God has been coming to their writings. And then there is this political science literature who has no idea even that there is God in the history of political thought. So after dealing with all of those aspects of political science that informs our contemporary politics, I realized that I'm really missing something very important in this. So I started searching for what it is that King David knew about God that allowed him to be king. Because without God, David would have never become king. So one of the first things I realized is that in our heritage, being a king meant being anointed by God. And that right there is a shocking discovery for my habits of just looking at elections as the solution to selecting politicians. So what does it really mean that God anoints and selects his own king? Obviously, it means that authority is higher than civil authority we understand today. So I came to the conclusion, I don't understand that divine authority that King David had. I didn't learn it in churches. Why? Because the priests and pastors that had influence on me didn't know it themselves. So you can't teach something you don't know. So I came to the conclusion that I am on the path to something that is so magnificent and majestic that will open my knowledge to sources of learning about politics I had no idea existed. So today, let's look at some of the wisdom of politics from King David in Psalm 68. We already talked about how King David invites God to arise. The psalm begins, "May God arise, and his enemies be scattered. May his foes flee before him." So right here we have political science of understanding that enemies of God flee when God arises. When God doesn't arise, they are all over the place. So how much time and effort we waste on dealing with all kinds of wickedness when we don't invite God to politics. It would have been so much easier to deal with conflicts and violence and wars and chaos, poverty, and many other difficulties that civil politics is dealing with. Then we came to the conclusion that when God shows up, the whole congregation participates in it. So God is the one who creates democracy. He is the one who deals with those who are connected to the king. The king is just there helping people connect to God, but God is the one who creates that connection. So this is transforming my understanding of democracy. And I think that this is what we may expand our imagination to and see that God is empowering people when He is present. He is not taking power away from them. He is empowering people that He rules, but in His laws and in His ways and in His light and life. And then we ended last broadcast's reflections with a passage that said, "Sing to God, sing in praise of His name, extol Him who rides on the clouds, rejoice before Him, His name is the Lord." So the rejoicing, singing, that becomes the foundation of politics. Rejoicing, singing, praising. And what do we have today in politics? Worries, attacks, gossip, fears. We have some very good laws, but also we have laws that are set up just to deal with all kinds of bad things, and then the laws become restraining, and then we have all the expenses that have to be put on law enforcement of laws that are dealing with anxieties and worries. So it is very difficult to praise anything or anyone in such anxious situation. Whereas when God arises, we sing praises to Him. The heart is filled with joy. There's rejoicing. So maybe we are doing something wrong in politics that would not be that difficult to change. I will give you an example. Let's suppose we have a session of Congress, and let's suppose that it starts with God presence there, right? And all the members of Congress are filled with rejoicing. There's rejoicing in their hearts. They clap their hands. They sing praises to God. The language becomes alive and happy and miraculously beautiful. Why don't we start learning how to do it. I think that would be wonderful. That would change the very language of the law by raising it to high levels of beauty, justice, and order. I would love to experience that. And let's continue now, as we know that God creates, He selects His king. God always works through kings or queens. That's just the way He does His expansion of authority. But it doesn't mean that the king is some sort of like autocrat. He is there just to help God connect to the people. So we have here the statement, a father, God is a father to the fatherless. Isn't it beautiful? A defender of widows. God is God in His holy dwelling. So a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows is God to His holy, is God in His holy dwelling. So God is a sort of divine social security administration. He is there to help the fatherless. So He is there to help widows, orphans, everybody in the kingdom who needs help. So God is not abandoning the weak. He is there providing for everybody. Let's continue this. God sets the lonely in families He leads out of. God sets the lonely in families, so He comforts the lonely in families. He leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. Wow. There's one thing that God doesn't like. He doesn't like those who rebel against Him. That is very deep, and I'll have to do more thinking about that. When you, God, went out before your people, when you marched through the wilderness, the earth shook, the heavens poured down rain before God, the one of Sinai, before God, the God of Israel. We have a lot of conflict now in the Middle East because the God calls Himself the God of Israel, the one of Sinai, but He is also the God of everybody. So I think that by bringing presence of God to international relations, we are opening the door for peace, because He then brings in peace in Israel, but also peace in all the country connected to Israel, all the countries connected to Israel. So I think that great political organizations today miss out by not inviting God to be present in their sessions. I was watching at some G7 politicians, and no one would say, hey, let God arise and His enemies scattered. They didn't do that. They would have considered this ridiculously stupid, but it isn't. It is the way to receive authority, connection to God that will solve the problems that politicians are dealing today with great difficulty, with great anxiety, with a lot of distraction. So I think that it may be very wise to see what happens if we open the door to current civil politics to include presence of the Lord. Basically, simply by saying, let God arise, and he will. Let's continue. This is King David addressing the Lord directly. You gave abundant showers, O God. You refreshed your weary inheritance. So that's another thing that we see in this psalm, in the other psalms as well, is that King David has conversations with the Lord, healthy conversations. And that is not something that can be done at will by anybody. This is something that comes with God permitting this and participating in it. So we don't have conversations with God today because our politicians don't even know that they can talk to him if they make him part of political speech and actions. So I invite all politicians of the world to start doing it. There's no limit to asking God for that, because once he revealed his political presence through Israel as the God of Israel, he is visible to everybody on earth. Now, there are certain ways to perceive that visibility. He's always there for everybody, but not easily seen because there are certain requirements put on a person or government to be able to perceive that light and presence of God. But here is another example how clearly King David talks to God and God talks to him. Now let me tell you that if I started saying things like this when I was a student, I probably would have landed on Mars very quickly. But here it is. This is a very serious example that King David received his majesty and his authority by having a relationship with the Lord, having conversations with him. This is the continuation of this conversation. Your people settled in it, and from your bounty, God, you provided for the poor. Before it was, you gave abundant showers, O God. You refreshed your weary inheritance. Your people settled in it, and from your bounty, God, you provided for the poor. So once again, we have God as the one who cares for the poor, who cares for his people. So he really is the king. He is the political power and political authority that cares for the people. He is what today we would understand as unelected president of the people. But he is there. He is caring for everybody. The Lord announces the word, and the women who proclaimed it are a mighty throng. Wow, talking about empowerment of women. By hearing the word of God, they become a mighty throng. Kings and armies flee in haste. The women at home divide the plunder. So it's a very inexpensive victory in war, because by God showing up, kings and armies flee, and the plunder is out there to be enjoyed, much cheaper than what we do today with wars. Even while you sleep among the sheep pens, the wings of my dove are sheathed with silver, its feathers with shining gold. This is so beautiful, because this shows that there is treasure that God reveals with His presence. A person can be just somewhere in a field tending cows and perceive that shining gold from God. And this is something that I actually experienced when I was a little girl, and my grandma let me care for her animals, and that light was just so beautiful and so filled with glory. And at that time I did not know that that was the presence of the Lord, because my grandma always invited him to be there. And I saw this light also in some other situations. So when we talk about treasure and money today, we are missing on this aspect of God's presence in politics, that dimension of beautiful living light revealing treasures that we can then perceive that are higher than what we consider today as modern economics. So we already have presence of the Lord in the statement on American money, "In God we trust," right? But now I would say to American money and to this message, let God arise in this trust. Let his enemies scatter. So it's very important to trust in the Lord, but then we also have to invite him to be present in economic life. I'm certain that we would experience something so beautiful, something so amazing, that it would transform the way we understand contemporary economics and financial processes. So let God arise in the world's money, not only in American money, but also in the world's money, because American money is so connected with all the other currencies. And I think that what I'm saying is bigger than Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I'm believing that when we receive that perception that is very real, that I experienced as a child and did not understand at that time, that was that divine treasure teaching me something and revealing itself to me. And now I feel that I can ask God to apply it to everything about treasure, understanding that I have in just ordinary ways. I'd love to be able to perceive that. So we don't have to worry that we are in some modest apartment or in a modest office, because God can reveal it anywhere, everywhere. Like we have on our phones, websites. We communicate. God can reveal this light, this website from heaven, so that we start seeing treasures at levels that we did not know were possible. Our ancestors knew this, I know for sure, because all of that light and all of that amazing perception that I learned when I was visiting my grandparents' farm and orchard, that it's real. And when we look at it as a gift from God, we also start understanding that security of finance and our money and wealth begins with the Lord. And when He brings His security, He focuses on our lives first. So there's security of life. And national security is extension of it. Today we have it reversed. National security first, and then life, and usually God is completely omitted from it. But let's invite God to show us this level of treasure that is mentioned here and called shining gold. And let's see how it will show